So welcome to Monetizing the Multi-Screen Consumer Experience. And I'll just read a brief intro before we have our panelists introduce themselves. Consumers are increasingly using mobile devices to watch professionally produced content, and video distributors are responding with a variety of offers, including TV Everywhere to enhance traditional pay TV, VOD libraries available over the top, and even live channel packages available over the top. In many cases, these offers are being targeted primarily to mobile device viewing, but may also be complementary to a TV viewing experience. This session discusses these trends and opportunities to monetize multi-screen viewing, including subscriptions, rentals, electronic sell-through, and advertising. So I am going to now, with that, ask the panelists to introduce themselves. First, Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony Peterson with Discovery Communications. I head up the product group for the US TV nets. Thanks for the invitation. Happy to join you guys today.
Good afternoon, I'm Mike Green. I run marketing and business development for the media group at Brightcove. Brightcove is an online video platform by sort of legacy name. It's evolved to be a lot more than that. We get to work with a lot of great customers and creating their video experiences, including Tony. And so thanks again for having us here.
Thank you. My name is Mike Lucero. I work for Ratio. It's up in Seattle. We are a company that develops end-user applications for connected TVs and mobile devices. And we've been in the video business for years now, about 4 or 5 years. We cut our teeth on the Xbox, and now we've expanded to Apple TV, Fire TV, and Roku, and a bunch of other platforms, and obviously mobile and tablet as well. And we're excited to be here. We have a lot to share with you, and hopefully this will be valuable.
And for those of you who came just to hear Mara, I apologize. She was unable to attend at the last minute, but the rest of us will try to make up for that. And to introduce myself, I'm Jonathan Hurd, a director with Altman, Vilandrie and Company. We're a technology, media, telecom-focused strategy consulting firm. And just to kick it off with a couple of facts, we do an annual consumer video survey at Altman Vilandrie, and in the last year's version of it, last summer, and we're about to field the next one, more than 40% of consumers under age 45 say that they use a tablet to watch TV shows and movies at least weekly. And when you look at the numbers over time, it has just exploded. And that's not of tablet owners, that's of everybody. With smartphones, they skew a little bit younger, but more than 40% of consumers under age 35 watch TV shows and movies weekly on a smartphone. So we are seeing an explosion of the multi-screen experience with all of this mobile usage. And maybe panelists, you could kick it off by talking about, are there sort of some obvious monetization opportunities here beyond some of the things that might require more sophistication? I know there's some points of view that you all have on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that mobile is very important all over the world, but especially in the US market. I mean, we're seeing on our websites now over 50% of the traffic is coming from mobile devices. So ignore that at your own peril, because people will be very disappointed. It also means that a lot of video is being consumed on mobile devices. We've had a big project over the last couple of years to make all of our websites in the US responsive. We've actually gone through a process, which not many media companies have done, of making sure that our entire web offering is one common code base. So it's for our 10 networks, 10 instances of the one common code base, all using the one instance of the Brightcove player, so that we know that across our whole network and across our whole offering, people are getting great video quality. We're not using a bunch of different players or a bunch of different versions of different players, and it's really important. Really important to be thinking about. Also, it's really important to make sure that you have a really deep integration with whoever your advertising provider is, so Freewheel or DoubleClick or whoever you choose. And by having one instance of a player fully integrated with that ad network, you can make sure that you're trafficking ads effectively, people are seeing the ads, making sure that you have competitive separation between your video ads and your display ads on the page. So, for a business like ours, which is particularly reliant on ad revenue, those are some of the things that you should be thinking about.
I think from the Brightcove perspective, we find ourselves in the middle as the technology layer that helps someone like Discovery connect their content to their audience. And there are a couple pieces in there in that technology layer, and you mentioned Freewheel and DoubleClick, and I guess as I see it, there's sort of two swim lanes. We sometimes say that we're in the video workflow swim lane, and they're in the kind of connecting audience or identifying audience across platforms swim lane. You know, when it comes to things like universal frequency capping, that's more of like a Freewheel concern perhaps, or DoubleClick concern. But it is really important to Tony's point that I think we as the OVP or as the player have the really strong integration with those types of companies. Brightcove has been around 10 years, and in that time we've developed a really rich ecosystem of partners. There's probably 300 or so partners connected to our platform, but certain ones, Freewheel like you guys use, touch a very broad set of our media customer base. And so we pay extra special sort of attention to making sure that that's right across platforms, that they have plugins for all the Brightcove SDKs and that sort of thing, so that the monetization is there to justify the business.
Yeah, Tony brings up a really interesting point that we're seeing across our customer base right now as well, which is this notion of having a single operational code base. Getting scale on those endpoints, whether it's connected TVs or mobile devices and tablets, is a trend that's happening with a lot of our customers right now. One of the examples is Pokemon, for whom we built their initial iOS and Android apps, and they were less they were less about pure video consumption. They were just apps to get apps out there. Then we built their apps for Fire TV and Roku. And now they want to modernize their platforms to make their iOS and Android apps more efficient and more monetizable from a business objectives perspective. So we're seeing a lot of our customers now looking at the entire footprint of endpoints and thinking about it holistically and trying to up-level all of their monetization across all those endpoints. So that's a trend we see, and scalability is really, this is the third platform that these folks need to really be successful at for making money, and they historically hadn't made as much money there, particularly with, in the case of Pokemon, with display ads, and now they're getting video ads there, which obviously have much better CPMs. So that is driving a lot of that behavior.
Yeah, could you talk about, so let's stick with the advertising theme before we get into some of the other areas here, but in terms of advertising CPMs on mobile, what are some of the trends there? Mike, one of the points you made before the panel was that it's hiding in plain sight, this mobile monetization.
Yes, it's actually, again, if you look at what I've worked on historically, starting with the Xbox, where we really saw there that the CPMs were TV-like and broadcast-like. That built obviously a huge $70 million business around video ads. And that's all, again, about scale. You have a 30-second TV spot, and you want to get that into as many places as you want. And there's a vibrant marketplace out there, with programmatic buying, et cetera, et cetera. So what's happened in mobile in the past year plus is that those CPMs are translating now into the video space as well. So obviously that means that content and that viewership has much more value from an economic standpoint. It's no longer the digital pennies, but now it's it's the equivalent of the analog dollars. And what's also interesting is that what we're seeing is that the more successful programmers are tuning their experiences a bit for that experience. Obviously, it's shorter form content. There's different sort of nuanced changes you make to the user experience that make it more for the mobile user. And the programmers that are making sense of that sort of demand from customers are the ones that are going to be more successful in terms of monetizing through advertising specifically.
There's an interesting trade-off, I think, in some of what Mike was saying on this point, which is that if you can get additional distribution for quality video content on mobile and find a way to successfully monetize it, and there are all sorts of things I guess we can talk about that may break the chain when it comes to monetizing mobile, but that the CPMs are plenty good, that you don't need to do all that much in the way of tricks. And there's lots of really creative things that people are doing on your platform, certainly like in the connected TV environment, and Discovery, being a creative company the way they are, can do all sorts of interesting things. We've got examples of that. But even just by getting to all the right places and just having a strategy to do that with your regular sort of desktop monetization strategy intact is a big win, given that there's demand for it. Premium publishers are all pretty much well sold out, even on mobile, and CPMs are fairly high.
Go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, it's a really simple point, but until someone sees an ad, you don't get paid. So if something breaks in the chain and ads aren't actually getting delivered in your mobile video, then no one's getting paid. So it's really important to have systems in place to make sure that, one, you know if ads aren't being delivered, and to be able to fix that stuff pretty quickly.
Yeah, we had some research on this recently. We actually did with streaming media, and I wish I could kind of quote it back in off the top of my head, but I think it was something like 66% of the respondents said that they're monetizing less than 10% of their mobile video. And I don't know if that was just that if it's a lot of it being consumed on mobile web, then they didn't have the proper integrations to ensure that a VPaid ad or another rich media ad wouldn't try to be delivered there, that would break the experience, or there's any number of things, again, that may cause breakage. And so we've really been focused on trying to help our customer base understand their options for, best practices in terms of using SDKs where applicable, or maybe taking a server-side approach to ensure that ads are stitched into content, so it's just one stream delivered seamlessly to any mobile endpoint, including longer tail mobile devices outside of Android and iOS, and so forth.
So getting ads there on mobile with higher CPMs, getting them there reliably. But Mike, you mentioned some creative things that are going on, either Mike or Tony, around going beyond just having an ad appear. Like what can you do with the mobile platform to make ads more engaging or make your consumers more engaged?
Well, so there's a couple things. At a very simple level, again, I sort of alluded to this earlier when I talked about focusing more on short-form content, and it does go back to the user experience. Like, there's a lot of concern, typically with publishers, that they don't want to turn off the user too quickly and overburden them with ads. So, and with short-form content, that gets trickier. But what we've even done on televisions, but that's even more applicable on mobile devices, is just doing what we call a playlist, where you basically, you run short-form content back to back, and you stick ads in between it, and that assures that there's going to be monetization and it's a good user experience. And you don't necessarily start with a pre-roll. You don't want to turn people off right away. You want to get them into the content and then run ads in between, just like sort of a typical TV experience would go. So that's kind of what I call the basic scenarios. If you want to get more advanced, though, on mobile, you obviously have a whole other, and this is probably more in the 12 to 24 month time frame. But since it's a mobile device and there's more data associated with it, including things like LBS, you can do some more interesting things around location. We actually did an interesting demo with Microsoft at CES where we showed, it was called the Armchaired Aisle demo, and we basically did it was actually on the Xbox, where we simulated one of our customers, the Whistle, having a piece of content that was locked on the Xbox, and then you had to download a mobile app in order to unlock that content, go to a store, buy something, and then you came back to the Xbox and it was unlocked. So, and in the store it was triggered by a beacon. So you're able to take the LBS technology, cause an event that then through the cloud triggers something on the back end on the Xbox server. So that's a very bespoke experience that doesn't scale very well, but it's still an interesting scenario. And as those scenarios start scaling, the fact that there's mobility suddenly opens up a whole new set of opportunities and experiences. So I'd say in the next 12 to 24 months, look for that to actually scale and become interesting.
What about the fact that these mobile devices have interactive capabilities? They're more personal, touch screens, et cetera. What have you seen, and maybe Discovery, you've done some things around interactivity of video?
Yeah, just on a broader note, I heard the end of the last talk, and those guys were talking about how complex it is and how difficult it is to get on all these devices now. I thought it was pretty interesting because it is, it's still not easy, but for those who've been doing it for a long time, it's never been easier, and that should be really exciting for all of you guys, because if you want to get a product out on all of these devices now, there are a number of platforms that can give you everything from encoding to distribution to a client to ad solutions to payment methods to some of this fun stuff that we're talking about, some of these interactive features. So it's actually never been easier as long as you have some sort of significant budget to do it. I mean, it's still not cheap. There's a lot of players in the market, and it is getting cheaper. But it also opens the path for all of you guys and all of us to be doing products that are sort of more niche and more for the super fans, and that's something that Discovery has definitely been doing a lot and will be concentrating a lot in the future. I'll give you a couple of examples. Well, one, which is my favorite, is we just had a live cam for a giraffe birth, which is pretty cool. I had no idea that a giraffe, when it's born, falls like 6 feet onto the ground and is totally fine. So don't worry about the baby giraffe. The baby giraffe is okay. But there have been like millions and millions of Americans who've like tuned in to watch a baby giraffe birth. Now that's a very niche little piece of interest there. So you know that anyone tuning in there is intensely interested in animals for a start, and probably intensely interested in giraffes as well, I'm guessing. So to take the time to watch a live giraffe birth. So the advertising experiences that you can give these people can be really targeted, have an amazing CPM, and can be really fun as well.
Were there mid-rolls?
So you got to be careful with the mid-roll in a giraffe birth, because it happens.
You might miss it. Right?
Happens pretty fast. But that's a really good point. I mean, you need the flexibility to be able to insert mid-rolls.
I gotta have the red button.
At will,
Right.
the red button. So I think some of those experiences are pretty interesting. Some other experiences that we've been playing with are platforms like there's a platform called AdWays, and there are a few of these. And you'll see something using AdWays and Brightcove coming up pretty soon, launching in the next few days. But these are intense superfan experiences where you can have some video and you can have hotspots within the video that people can interact with and play, something about a particular piece of that video, some background on, what happened leading up to the giraffe birth, for example. So I think some of that stuff is really interesting and really well targeted and pretty exciting for the industry.
Well, if you've got big enough content, and I know that you did the AdWays thing in the past with Shark Week, which drew enough scale that you could do that, and you had Gillette as the integrated advertiser where the hotspot, could turn to a piece of sponsored content, a video within a video, and things like that. If you have big enough content, then the scale is there. And actually, AdWays is an example of one of those technologies that's built into the platform. If you want to add it as an interactive layer to your player, you can do that and bring an advertiser to the party, I guess.
So one of the things that when people first started buying tablets, using tablets, there was this prediction or discussion around, hey, it's a companion device. While you're watching TV, you'll have some complementary content that is interactive. And, with the exception of sports statistics or fantasy leagues or whatever, none of that has really caught on. I'm curious what your points of view are on, is it something that's going to happen in the future still, or are there fundamental reasons why we haven't seen the mobile devices as a companion to the traditional TV?
Well, it's great that it's great for us that what we've dedicated our life to working on isn't a companion, right? It's actually turning into a real distribution channel that people are consuming, the main event on, which is great. I think we've all played with companion experiences, and some of those have been moderately successful, and I think some, relating to like big game shows and big sporting events have been wildly successful at times. I think from experiences with sort of serialized or long-running week-to-week shows, we sort of found that the amount of effort you need to put into promotion to get people to keep turning up week to week and opening these companion applications kind of was out of whack with the amount of people who were actually turning up week to week. So, you've got to weigh it up against the size of the event and, how much promotion the event's getting on the whole. And I think big events, those sort of experiences can still be really fun and really form community and get people really involved. So an Oscars or an MTV VMAs or those sort of events, those sort of companion apps can be pretty successful.
The companion app experience that we've seen that ties to this panel, it's not rocket science, it is in fact sports, to your point, but a lot of people have done, EVS, for example, a partner of Brightcove's offers a program called CCast, or an application called CCast, which on a tablet, let's say if you're watching the broadcast feed on your TV in your living room, you can get the subsequent camera angles all in an iPad experience. And they've done a good job of offering the ability to wrap sponsors around the camera that follows Messi around or something like that. And that's where there's enough scale for World Cup. I think Sony India may have done that for World Cup. I know that one of the case studies we have on our website is a big rugby tournament in Australia that shows how they did that, and there's a monetization experience there, which again, if it's a wrapped, sponsored type of thing, you don't have to worry about a lot of the ad serving integrations on mobile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it just goes back to scale. It's like I worked on the smart glass that the Xbox had with lots of fanfare a few E3s ago, and there was some amazing scenarios that were really expensive to build, and unless you can justify it from a monetary perspective, and it was actually designed for scale. It was designed to sort of suck up your web experiences and turn them into an app. But that, without the investment in making it special, is just not enough to make it compelling. So Yeah, I think it's going to be the 5 to 10% of the super big events that are going to be successful. But I think there's still an opportunity for the killer app in second screen, and we at Ratio intend to keep experimenting and try to find some of those things, but it's not painfully obvious what that is, and we know a lot of places where it's not.
Right. And we were talking ahead of the panel about perhaps there may even be, it's not the second screen necessarily, but the second device that you might interact with some kind of haptic interface on an Apple Watch, or something that engages you with other senses, perhaps, other than taking your attention away from the big screen and looking at a smaller screen. It's more a complementary kind of you can watch one thing and feel something else. So perhaps there's an opportunity there. Going back to another form of monetization, which is just getting traditional TV subscribers to retain their subscriptions. So customer retention, the whole TV everywhere approach, the authenticated viewing that cable operators or MVPDs more broadly are using. There's certainly some very compelling experiences that are coming out there from certain cable operators. Still a relative lack of awareness of many of these capabilities, but what are you seeing there that's particularly compelling? And Tony, maybe from a discovery point of view, to what extent is authenticated viewing important versus just having that direct relationship with consumers?
Yeah, so I'm not here to announce any new products, unfortunately, but if you look across the landscape of MVPDs and programmers, there's some really successful TVE applications out there. And when I worked at Viacom, we released a bunch of them, really successful. And from what I hear from talking to other colleagues in the industry, authentication rates are climbing at a pretty rapid pace across the board for TVE applications. So I think there's still some challenges there. There's the whole MVPD login and password is something that many people haven't used since they signed up for their cable subscription, in some cases many years ago. So there's not a whole lot of awareness there, and people sometimes have to go digging for those credentials, whereas it's not like something that they've signed up for in the last couple of years in many cases. So that's can be a bit of a barrier to authentication. I think the industry as a whole is working on that. Concepts like home-based authentication, where you can look at a range of IP addresses and find out if you're connecting to an MVPD and then signing you up automatically without even having to put in any credentials, is really exciting for the industry. And I think you'll see a lot more of that sort of innovation come up as far as TVE goes. And especially with some big events like the World Cup football and Olympics, many people who had never really messed with TVE found themselves signing up and understanding that it's a pretty easy system. And just as an industry, there's a lot of benefit there for both the cable operators and the programmers to have some sort of association like that.
I think related to that, if you're going to ask me kind of what are the most exciting opportunities for mobile monetization, it would be live 24/7 streaming and the viewing of that out of home being entirely incremental. If you can solve for the monetization question there, that's something obviously that a lot of people, we just came back from NAB and Brightcove amongst others spent a lot of time talking about 24/7 live streaming with dynamic ad insertion if somebody wants it. And it's in a TVE sense, the question sometimes becomes, do you swap out the linear ad load, which qualifies you for your Nielsen C3 rating, with dynamically targeted ads, which may, on a CPM basis, maybe make you more money? Mm-hmm. I think the jury's still out on that one. But again, a lot of that viewing, if you can solve for it, is incremental and an opportunity for mobile monetization, no question.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much volume of viewing, as you mentioned, Tony. 50%, is through that type of behavior. So, for the network distributors. So you got to be able to figure out how to monetize that and make sure that it's in line with your MVPD deals. So solving that is absolutely critical.
Yeah, one other good thing that's working in our favor on that one, I think, is that at least in Boston, where I live, I mean, Xfinity hotspots are now everywhere. So you're trying to offload a lot of that data usage that would otherwise eat away your data plan. If you want to watch, watch ESPN while you're at your kid's soccer game or something like that, you can do that, and maybe you'd be covered by a hotspot and not be eating up your data plan.
Yeah, and not to tout Comcast specifically of any MVPDs, but they do have the most, I think it's widely believed, the most heavily used TV Everywhere set of applications of any MVPD. And just in the last year, and this is very much from a consumer perspective, but a couple of things that I really have found incredibly valuable that make me want to keep a cable subscription. I think one is being able to watch a different channel from what's on the set-top box on a tablet. So my wife can be watching one thing in the living room, I can be in my office with a tablet watching the Red Sox. Another thing is being able to download, depending on who the content owner is, being able to download some apps, or some programs rather, to a tablet, watch them later. And so that, these are just things that didn't exist a year ago. So the experience for consumers is becoming a lot more engaging as well.
Yeah, and I think that's super important, because if you've ever talked to an MVPD, what they care about is putting value into the cable bill. You've got your $150 cable bill, and you think it's so much money, but using that as a retention tool is super important for the MVPDs. So that's what's going to get them to sign those TV Everywhere deals.
And for that $150, there's an enormous amount of content there, an enormous amount. And so, being able to watch several devices in the same household is a really great thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about content consumer relationships, or content owners. With OTT, we're seeing a lot of activity in the last year of content owners or producers going direct to consumer, or at least having differentiated offers. And I was certainly going to ask Mara about this as well. But Tony and the Mikes, what do you guys see as the opportunities here for monetization in an OTT world for content providers? And don't announce any products or anything, but in terms of how do you think about that versus the traditional pay TV relationship, and beyond monetizing via advertising or retention, are there other opportunities that you see as particularly interesting from a monetization perspective?
I think it's not even talking about programmers like Discovery, but for all of you guys in the room, it's an enormous opportunity. It's for the first time probably ever, I think, for maybe a couple of $1 million, any of you guys can spin up what is potentially a live 24/7 network and sell it to consumers directly. That's pretty great. It's pretty amazing. You have the ecosystems like the App Store and Google Play. You have many platforms that do all of your encoding, distribution, take your payments, provide ready-built clients. So for any of you guys, it's an enormous opportunity where all these barriers have been sort of broken through, where you can get content into the hands of consumers and get paid for it. So I don't think it comes down to any particular one of us that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for everyone out there.
Yeah. I think there's two items that are super interesting in terms of watching some of those trends come to life over the next year or so, which is what Vessel is doing in terms of the smaller level subscriptions. I think that sort of a non-mainstream content creator creating smaller, more sort of easily to purchase, lower friction from that perspective offerings, and seeing how well that does in terms of people's willingness to buy that type of content at that price point is going to be very interesting. And then the other trend that is equally interesting, in my opinion, is what's going on with the MCNs the multi-channel networks, as they go off of YouTube and try to go into other devices where they could ostensibly make a lot more money than they can through YouTube, where they get hit with a pretty big rev share. So that, to Tony's point, it's like these are just content producers that are with various levels of sophistication. And the fact that they can suddenly, with a bit of an audience on YouTube, suddenly be in all these places if they're willing to make not crazy expensive investments like you used to have when you were having to get distribution deals through MVPDs, but just get onto all these devices. And the fact that a lot of that content is particularly mobile friendly, I think makes the mobile part of it super relevant.
If I can jump on two of those themes that Mike was laying out with specific examples. You mentioned Vessel, really interesting. I think they do 75% of the ads that they do, actually, at least for their subscribers. They still have ads. It's a hybrid model, but I think they're like 3 to 5 second ads, kind of like bumpers. And there's been a lot of experimentation, certainly for mobile, with shorter ads. And I missed Mike Park's speech from Twitter this morning, but I know that he's been promoting now for a long time. When someone cuts a 30 and cuts a 15, hey, Discovery, make sure they cut a 6 also. And I don't know if that's gotten any traction yet, but it seems to be there's some experimentation in that area, especially given that a lot of consumption is on mobile. So Vessel is definitely being creative in that area. And then on the MCN side, Tastemade is a Brightcove customer with a very mobile-centric audience, a lot of really great short-form food content. I mean, I think of them almost like the Food Network of the MCNs that came out of YouTube, and they got a strong enough brand, they raised some money, and they put out a shingle, sort of like their own shop and their own sites and apps, and it's terrific experience. And like we were talking about earlier, they've actually chosen to avoid some of the risks potentially with ad serving into mobile environments by doing a lot of integrated brand sponsorship. And now they're at the scale, I think, where they can do that and know that if someone is cooking with, I don't know, Land O'Lakes butter, you don't have to worry that it's going to break over the connectivity of someone trying to watch that video in Times Square because it's in the video. And they've done a really nice job of that, and I've gotten a lot of credit, I think, for that. And actually, one thing they did do was a study with Nielsen talking about brand affinity and I guess the rate at which viewers remember a brand when it's either integrated versus served as a pre-roll, and it was like 5x recall when it's actually brand integrated. I mean, it supports the way they approach things, obviously, but it was an interesting piece of data they put out.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. We hadn't talked really about effectively sponsored content as another monetization possibility. But
one thing people love about that, of course, is sponsored content when it travels through social networks also avoids the fact that Facebook hasn't offered, a monetization solution for you yet, and Twitter has rules around the Amplify program. And so if someone's cooking with Land O'Lakes butter and the video ends up getting a ton of views on Facebook, that's probably fine with Tastemade.
Right. Yeah, I guess, Tony, back to your point on now the technology is there. Everybody could do this. It's not a problem from a implementation perspective. I think in some of the business cases, though, that we see that don't underestimate the amount you're going to have to spend on raising awareness, generating awareness. I mean, look at even TV everywhere. It's less than 50% of consumers, of cable TV subscribers whose providers offer TV everywhere, they don't even know it exists. And that's very important. So if you're a player out there, certainly make sure you have a plan for demand generation that's economical and that's fit into your business case.
Yeah, I mean that's a really really good point, and a bit of wisdom you've just dropped there. I think over my career I've launched about over 300 applications, which is a lot, and some of them that you're sure are going to be a home run. Get no traction, and others that you didn't really know about or didn't really have a lot of confidence in have been downloaded millions of times. So, and these have all been for big media companies, and they're big brands that people generally know. I think building a brand from scratch as an OTT solution is really hard. There's some really smart people in this space trying to do this, and it's not for the faint of heart and for the smaller budget. So you do need to do a lot of promotion. You need to probably have it's back to marketing 101. Don't try and have a massive offering that covers all the bases. Try and go out with some niche content that a small part of the market is really intensely interested in, because that's what you're going to capture. Potentially, and it's still going to take a lot of promotion. So you need to go out there. You need to have not spent all of your operating capital just getting to that point, and you need to have enough cash to be promoting this thing on many different channels to get an audience there, and not only to get a download in the first place, but to get people to keep coming back is really really tough in this space.
Yeah, there's a rule of thumb in entertainment. I think that 50% of a production or of a budget should go to production, and 50% should go to marketing. And I believe that absolutely holds true in OTT, whether it's mobile or other OTT devices. We always encourage our publishers to think that way. And the other thing that's super important, and again harder on mobile, which means you have to actually go elsewhere to push people into mobile, but it's working with the platform teams to actually drive that promotion. We had BYU TV is an app we recently launched on Fire TV that was super successful because Fire TV did a great job promoting that in in their inventory in their environment. So you need to do that. No matter which platform you're on, you need to drive people to that engagement in order to build the audience.
Questions from the audience. We have about 10 minutes left here. So yes.
It's a three-parter. I'll give it to you quick. You say the CPMs are high. What are the CPMs, or at least a range of the CPMs? When you tell a client this is what the CPM is and it's real high, how do you deal with their reaction? Because they're used to the broader market, obviously. And how many clients have been able to put some sort of measurement in to see their ROI on these high CPMs?
Okay, so repeating the question. CPMs are high. How high are they? And when you communicate with a client about those high CPMs, how do you deal with their reaction? Third, have any of the clients put in measurement systems to measure the ROI of their campaigns?
I'm going to throw to you guys for that one. I don't want to talk about numbers of discovery CPMs.
I will say that Brightcove has a broad customer base, and on the high end, you'd expect the publishers who deal with business finance type of content are $75 and north, and that holds. I mean, that number I think is blended from my perspective, desktop and mobile and so forth. I don't know that I've seen a huge distinction between the two. I don't really know much about how the conversation goes these days with the agencies who are making those buys. I do know that there are increasingly a number of other requirements that come along with buys. People want to understand viewability metrics now. They want to make sure that if they want to do something creative in terms of rich media, that it can work in all the places that they hope to execute their campaign, and that's kind of what flows into the interesting things that are going on in smart TV. We have this product called Once. The idea there is server-side ad stitching technology. It puts the ad, stitches it to the content, which ensures that if you're playing back on desktop, let's say, that ad blockers can't stop the ad from appearing because it seems that the ad is just stitched to the content and the player doesn't recognize a call out to freewheel or double click. And at the same time, we have technology that hopefully should fire beacons at certain points during playback to ensure that at least X amount of the ad was viewed or that they made it to the content. And so all these different types of technologies that are being required essentially between the publisher and the advertiser are incumbent upon us as the platform partner to help execute and make sure that those CPMs, when they're paid, are justified.
Yeah, in terms of the CPMs, I try to sort of share what I kind of get a sense of based on my research, and it varies by publisher, obviously it varies by content, by audience, et cetera. But it seems like to be conservative to the people that I talk to, I say it's about between $25 and $35 is sort of the typical CPM. It gets as high as 50, 75, 100 depending on who the audience is. Obviously, financial services is going to be super high because those are premium users. Obviously, if you get a lot of millennials, you're going to get higher CPMs. So there's a lot of variables based on your audience. If it's more tail content, it can tend to be lower as well. So it's a very nuanced discussion, but I try to say 25 is through the ad networks, you'll get something along those lines. The other thing that's important to note is that obviously there's a question of you're selling those ads directly if you're selling them through an ad network, because then they get a piece of that action as well. There's typically a rev share associated with that. So I typically sort of try to make sure everybody knows sort of not just what the economics for the CPM look, but what does the economics of the ecosystem look like. So that's, in terms of the CPMs, that's how I look at it. In terms of the requirements, as Mike said, there's typically, and Hulu kind of set the bar here in terms of quartile data about how much of an ad was viewed and only paying if there's a complete view, that type of thing. So that again varies by publisher, and it typically sort of translates to what other ad rules they typically have on other platforms that they're selling. In terms of the analytics, that's actually a really good question. We haven't talked that much about it, but we do know we spend a lot of time with ComScore and Nielsen, and they're obviously very anxious to get more and more involved in that. And as that happens, as that third-party validation occurs, the CPMs are only going to get more valuable because that's obviously a requirement for a lot of the advertisers that it be validated by third parties. So as Nielsen and ComScore start getting more penetration into all these platforms, that's going to bring up the CPMs across the board. And then the other thing is obviously targeting in and of itself can also bring more value into the CPM.
That's actually a really good point. I can't believe we didn't mention it until now in the Q&A, but obviously the ability to do the same targeting that you might do on desktop in mobile, it's improving, but it's not quite at parity, right? Mm-hmm. So there's all sorts of parameters that might get passed from someone's cookie, browser history or whatever else, that can match, particularly if you're doing programmatic, if you're experimenting with open exchanges. On desktop, your fill rate might be better, perhaps, than on mobile. Also, because if you do too much in the way of, daisy chaining and redirects and so forth, things can time out. Obviously, a lot of our publishers choose to set a rule that say that if in 400 milliseconds you have an ad back, don't risk the brand, don't risk the consumer experience, just give them the content. So there's all sorts of things that but from our premium publisher base, the Discoveries of the world, who are doing mostly just direct sales, they're not experiencing a lot of that breakage.
Other questions? Yes.
So when I experience OTT for the most part, as you guys mentioned, I've seen the same 15s and 30s that I see on TV. Other than going to 6 seconds, what have you guys seen that really takes advantage of the platform, for example, interactivity?
So I'll repeat the question. OTT today, you're pretty much saying seeing similar ads to what you'd see on traditional TV, other than the 6-second ads on mobile platforms. What other innovations are we seeing?
I can throw out one example.
Go ahead,
So with on-demand content as opposed to live content, you can build in some interactivity such that if somebody wants to click into the Clinique store and start looking at different makeups and so forth, I've seen a company like Brightline deliver that. Again, for a big customer that wants to use that type of ad technology, they want to make sure that in the case of it's actually a once integration, that the VMAP is provided saying all the elements that are going to come down in the stream. Can you properly instruct the player to interact and provide that level of interactivity with the end user if they're using a Roku remote or whatever it is? There are some challenges there, but we've seen some experimentation. I would say it's fairly limited at this point from what I've seen. But.
Yeah, I think along the same lines, and again, this is on a scalable approach that works in mobile and tablet in particular, is VPaid, which is sort of an interactive ad unit, which actually delivers a companion ad and sort of interactivity at scale. So that's actually a super valuable experience that is unique to mobile monetization that I think not enough people are taking advantage of. I think as people see that opportunity, they're going to start taking more advantage of that.
Yeah.
It's something we're contemplating from a product perspective in terms of what we're bringing to customers on mobile, and I think that's going to take off once we start seeing performance metrics around that.
Yeah. SDKs for native apps, mobile and in smart TV, often can handle VPaid and stuff like that. Obviously mobile web has limitations, and there are other areas you run into limitations for doing companion banners and overlays.
Other questions? Dan gave us permission to go over by a couple of minutes since we started late. So anything else? All right. Well, please join me in thanking our panelists.